Before I begin, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being here, for listening, for letting me share these pieces of my life with you. In a world that moves so fast, it means everything to know that someone is willing to slow down and hear what I've been through. These stories aren't easy to tell, but they're real, and they matter to me. If you find something here that resonates with you, please consider subscribing. It helps me keep going, and it reminds me that I'm not alone in this. I remember the exact moment I realized my marriage was a performance. It was a Thursday in late September 2019, and the rain was coming down hard against the windows of our townhouse in Silver Spring, Maryland. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of tea that had gone cold, staring at a credit card statement I wasn't supposed to see. My husband, Eric, had left his laptop open when he rushed out that morning, and there it was, glowing on the screen. Charges I didn't recognize. A hotel in Baltimore, restaurants I'd never been to, jewelry from a boutique I'd never heard of. My hands were shaking when I took a photo of the screen with my phone. I don't know why I did it. Maybe some part of me already knew I'd need proof later. Maybe I just needed to make it real, to have evidence that I wasn't imagining things. Eric had been distant for months, but I'd convinced myself it was work stress. He was a regional manager for a pharmaceutical company, always traveling, always on calls. I was a graphic designer working from home, and our lives had started to feel like two parallel lines that never quite touched. I didn't confront him that night. I waited. I watched. I started paying attention to the small things. The way he tilted his phone away from me when a text came in. The new cologne he wore on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The late meetings that always seemed to run until 10 or 11 at night. And I kept taking photos, screenshots of receipts, pictures of his calendar. I built a file on my phone labeled recipes so he wouldn't get suspicious if he saw it. By November, I had enough to know the truth. Her name was Jessica, and she worked in his office. She was 26, blonde, always posting on Instagram about her perfect life. I found her through a tagged photo from a company event. She'd captioned it with a wine glass emoji and "best team ever." Eric was in the background, smiling at her in a way he hadn't smiled at me in years. I could have confronted him then. I could have thrown the evidence in his face and demanded answers. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was fear, or maybe it was the conversation I overheard one night when I pretended to be asleep. Eric was on the phone in the spare bedroom, the one we'd set up as an office. I stood in the hallway, my heart pounding so hard I thought he'd hear it through the wall. "She has no idea," he said, his voice low and casual, like he was talking about the weather. "And honestly, it's better this way. Once the divorce goes through, she won't get much. Most of the assets are in my name. She's been working freelance, barely bringing in anything. My lawyer says I'll be fine." There was a pause, and I imagined Jessica on the other end laughing, telling him how smart he was. "Yeah, I know," Eric continued. "It's been dead for a while. I'm just waiting for the right time. Maybe after the holidays. I don't want to deal with her family drama at Christmas." I went back to bed that night and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just lay there, feeling the weight of his betrayal settle into my bones. And somewhere in that silence, a plan started to form. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of a quick exit. I wasn't going to let him paint me as the sad, broke, desperate wife who got left behind. If Eric wanted to play games, I'd play too. But I'd play smarter. The first thing I did was open a new bank account. I used my maiden name and set up the statements to go paperless, with alerts only to my phone. Then I started funneling money into it. Not big amounts, nothing that would raise flags. Just small transfers from our joint account, 100 here, 200 there. I labeled them as groceries, gas, household expenses. Eric never checked. He was too busy buying lingerie for Jessica. I also started taking on more freelance work, but I kept it quiet. I told Eric I was struggling to find clients, that the market was tough. Meanwhile, I was working late into the night, designing logos, websites, marketing materials for small businesses. Every paycheck went straight into my hidden account. By January 2020, I had $15,000 saved. But I didn't just save money. I documented everything. I kept a journal with dates, times, and details of every suspicious behavior. I backed up all the photos and screenshots to a cloud account he couldn't access. I even hired a private investigator for 2 weeks in December just to make sure I had solid proof. The photos he sent me were gut-wrenching. Eric and Jessica holding hands at a Christmas market in Annapolis, kissing outside a bar in Fells Point, checking into a hotel with an overnight bag. I paid the investigator in cash and kept the photos in a locked folder on my laptop. I was building a case brick by brick, and Eric had no idea. Christmas that year was surreal. We went to his parents' house in Bethesda, and I played the role of the loving wife. I smiled for photos, laughed at his dad's jokes, helped his mom in the kitchen. Eric's sister, Morgan, pulled me aside at one point and said, "You two seem really happy. I'm so glad Eric found someone like you." I nodded and hugged her, and inside I felt like I was made of glass, about to shatter. By February, I had $25,000 saved, and I was ready to make my move. But I didn't want a dramatic confrontation. I didn't want to give Eric the chance to spin the story his way. So I did something I knew would hurt him more than any argument ever could. I disappeared, not literally. I didn't pack my bags and vanish in the middle of the night. Instead, I slowly started pulling away. I stopped asking about his day. I stopped cooking dinner. I started spending more time in the spare bedroom, claiming I had deadlines. I became a ghost in my own home, and Eric barely noticed. He was too wrapped up in Jessica to care. In March, I filed for divorce. I didn't tell him first. I had a lawyer serve him the papers at his office, right in front of his colleagues. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Catherine, who came highly recommended, had advised me to go for the element of surprise. "Men like him don't expect their wives to have a backbone," she'd said. "Let's show him he's wrong." The papers detailed everything: the affair, the financial manipulation, the emotional abuse. I wasn't asking for much, just what was fair. But I made sure Eric knew I had evidence, lots of it. He called me that night, furious. "What the hell is this, Claire? You can't just blindside me like this." I kept my voice calm. "I'm done, Eric. I've been done for a while. You'll hear from my lawyer." "You're making a huge mistake," he said. "You think you can survive without me? You don't have anything, no savings, no career, nothing." I almost laughed. "We'll see." I hung up, blocked his number, and slept better than I had in months. The divorce took 6 months to finalize. Eric fought me on everything, but Catherine was relentless. She presented the evidence of his affair, the financial records showing how he'd been hiding money, the testimony from the private investigator. In the end, I got half of everything, including the townhouse, which we sold and split the proceeds. I walked away with just over $100,000, plus the money I'd saved. But I didn't tell anyone about the money. Not my friends, not my family, not even my sister, who I was close to. As far as everyone knew, I was broke and struggling. I moved into a cheap studio apartment in Tacoma Park, bought secondhand furniture, and kept working freelance. I lived simply, almost invisibly. Eric, on the other hand, moved in with Jessica. They got engaged within 3 months. I saw the announcement on Facebook, a photo of them on a beach somewhere, her hand prominently displaying a massive diamond ring. The comments were full of congratulations, people saying how perfect they were together. I didn't react. I didn't comment, didn't like, didn't share. I just saved the photo to my recipes folder and kept living my quiet life. Over the next year, I focused on myself. I took online courses in web development and digital marketing, expanding my skill set. I started working with bigger clients, charging higher rates. By the end of 2020, I had over $200,000 in my account, and my freelance business was thriving. I even hired a financial advisor to help me invest wisely, but I still lived like I was broke. I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic. I shopped at thrift stores. I avoided expensive restaurants and vacations. And I didn't tell anyone the truth. In November 2021, I got an invitation to Eric's 10-year college reunion. It was being held at a fancy hotel in downtown DC, and the invite had been sent to my old email address, the one I'd kept for professional contacts. I stared at it for a long time, debating whether to go. Then I thought about Eric and Jessica, probably planning to show up looking like the perfect couple, basking in their happiness. And I thought about all the people who probably assumed I was still broken and struggling. I RSVP'd yes. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. I bought a dress, a sleek black number that fit like a glove. I got my hair done, my nails done. I even splurged on a pair of designer heels. When I looked in the mirror the night of the reunion, I barely recognized myself. I looked confident, polished, successful. I looked like someone who had won. The reunion was everything I expected. The hotel ballroom was decorated with string lights and nostalgic photos from their college days. There was a live band, an open bar, and tables full of people catching up and reliving old memories. I walked in alone, my head held high, and immediately felt the eyes on me. I saw Eric and Jessica almost right away. They were standing near the bar, surrounded by a group of his old friends. Jessica was wearing a tight red dress and laughing loudly at something someone said. Eric looked the same, maybe a little softer around the middle, his hairline creeping back slightly. I didn't approach them. I got a drink and mingled, catching up with a few people I vaguely remembered. And then, about an hour in, Morgan spotted me. "Claire!" she called out, rushing over to hug me. "Oh my God, I didn't know you'd be here. You look amazing." "Thanks, Morgan," I said, smiling. "It's good to see you." She pulled back, studying me. "How have you been? I heard about the divorce. I'm so sorry." "I'm doing really well, actually," I said. "Better than ever." She looked surprised. "Really? That's great. I'm glad to hear it." We chatted for a few minutes, and then she asked the question I'd been waiting for. "So, what have you been up to? Are you still doing design work?" "I am," I said. "Actually, I started my own agency earlier this year. We focus on branding and digital marketing for small businesses. It's been going really well. We just signed our 20th client last month." Morgan's eyes widened. "Claire, that's incredible. Good for you." "Thanks," I said. "It's been a lot of work, but I love it." She glanced over at Eric, who was now watching us from across the room. "Does Eric know?" I shrugged. "I don't know. We don't really talk." Morgan shook her head. "He should. He always underestimated you." I didn't respond to that. I just smiled and took another sip of my drink. As the night went on, word seemed to spread. People kept coming up to me, asking about my business, congratulating me. I didn't brag or boast. I just answered their questions honestly, letting the facts speak for themselves. And then, finally, Eric approached me. He looked uncomfortable, his hands shoved in his pockets. "Claire, can we talk?" I set my drink down on a nearby table. "Sure." He led me to a quieter corner of the room, away from the crowd. Jessica stayed at the bar, watching us with a tight expression. "I heard you started a business," Eric said. "That's great." "Thanks." "I didn't know you were doing so well," he said, and there was something in his voice. Regret, maybe, or envy. "There's a lot you don't know," I said calmly. He shifted his weight. Look, I know things ended badly between us, but I want you to know I never meant to hurt you. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no longing. Just a distant sort of pity. You didn't just hurt me, Eric, I said quietly. You tried to destroy me. You thought I'd fall apart without you. But I didn't. I rebuilt myself, and I did it better than before. He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't let him. I don't need your apology, I continued. I don't need your regret. I just need you to know that I'm fine, better than fine, and I did it all without you. I walked away before he could say anything else. I didn't look back. I stayed at the reunion for another hour, laughing and talking with people who were genuinely happy for me. And when I finally left, I felt lighter than I had in years. I drove home through the quiet streets of DC, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. When I got back to my apartment, I kicked off my heels, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat by the window. I thought about the girl I'd been a year ago, sitting at that kitchen table with cold tea and a broken heart. And I thought about the woman I was now, strong and independent and free. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need Eric to suffer. I just needed to know that I'd survived, that I'd won on my own terms. And as I sat there, looking out at the city, I realized something. The best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. It's quiet and steady. It's living well. It's becoming the person they never thought you could be. And I had. Story. I pretended to lose my memory. After my husband hit me, he confessed everything. The first thing I remember after waking up is the white walls, white sheets, white fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. My head felt like it had been split open and badly glued back together. There was a sharp, persistent ache behind my left eye, and when I tried to move, my neck screamed in protest. Mrs. Voss, can you hear me? A woman's voice, calm and clinical. I blinked, trying to focus. A nurse stood beside my bed, holding a chart. She had kind eyes, the sort of eyes that had seen too much and still managed to stay soft. Where am I? My voice came out hoarse, barely more than a whisper. You're at Georgetown University Hospital in Washington, D.C., she said. You were brought in last night. You suffered a head injury. Do you remember what happened? I did. I remembered everything. The argument in our kitchen in Arlington. The way David's face had twisted with rage. The feel of his hand connecting with the side of my head so hard I'd fallen and hit the marble countertop on the way down. The cold floor against my cheek. The taste of blood in my mouth. But I looked at the nurse and I said, no, I don't remember anything. It wasn't a plan, not at first. It was instinct, some deep, primal part of me that knew I needed time, needed space, needed to figure out what to do next. So I lied. You don't remember the fall? The nurse asked, her brow furrowing. I don't remember anything, I said again, and this time I let my voice shake a little. I don't even know how I got here. The nurse made a note on her chart. That's not uncommon with head trauma. I'll let the doctor know. Your husband is outside. He's been here all night. Should I send him in? My stomach turned. Okay. She left, and I had maybe 30 seconds to prepare myself before David walked through the door. He looked terrible. His hair was a mess, his eyes red-rimmed, his shirt wrinkled. He rushed to my side, reaching for my hand. Lily, thank God, I've been so worried. I pulled my hand back slightly, not too much, just enough to seem confused. I'm sorry. Do I know you? His face went pale. Lily, it's me, David, your husband. I stared at him, keeping my expression blank. My husband? Yes, he said, his voice cracking. We've been married for 6 years. You really don't remember? I shook my head slowly, wincing at the pain. I don't remember anything. The nurse said I hit my head, but I don't know how." David sat down in the chair beside my bed, running his hands through his hair. He looked genuinely shaken, and part of me wanted to feel sorry for him. But then I remembered the sound of his hand hitting my face, the way he'd stood over me afterward, shouting that it was my fault, that I'd pushed him too far. "You fell," he said finally. "In the kitchen. You must have slipped or something. I found you on the floor and called 911. I let the lie sit there between us. I didn't challenge it. I just nodded, as if I believed him. The doctor came in a little while later, a middle-aged man with glasses and a no-nonsense demeanor. He asked me a series of questions, testing my memory. I answered some and pretended not to know others. I said I didn't remember my address, my job, or how I'd ended up in the hospital. But I made sure to remember basic things, like my name and the year, so it seemed believable. "Retrograde amnesia," the doctor said to David. "It's not uncommon with this type of injury. Her memories may come back over time, or they may not. We'll need to monitor her closely." David nodded, playing the part of the concerned husband. "Whatever she needs, doctor. I just want her to be okay." They kept me in the hospital for 2 more days. During that time, David barely left my side. He brought me flowers, magazines, my favorite snacks. He told me stories about our life together, trying to jog my memory. He talked about how we'd met at a conference in Boston in 2016, how he'd proposed on a beach in North Carolina, how we'd bought our house in Arlington just before the pandemic. I listened, and I pretended to be interested, even touched. But inside, I was watching him, studying him, waiting. Because I knew David. I'd lived with him for 6 years, loved him for most of that time. And I knew that underneath the charm and the concern there was something else. Something dark and volatile that he kept locked away until it wasn't. When they finally discharged me, David drove me home. The house looked the same as I remembered it, a 2-story colonial with a neat front yard and a black mailbox by the door. But walking inside felt different, like stepping into a stranger's life. David had cleaned the kitchen. The blood was gone, the countertops spotless. He'd even put fresh flowers on the table, white lilies, my favorite. It was almost sweet if you didn't know what he was covering up. "I thought we'd take it slow," he said, helping me to the couch. "You should rest. Doctor's orders." I nodded, sinking into the cushions. "Thank you." He sat beside me, too close, and took my hand. "I know this is hard, Lily, but we'll get through it. I'll help you remember." I looked at him, and I said, "I'm lucky to have you." He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that might have fooled anyone else. But I saw the relief in his eyes, the way his shoulders relaxed. He thought he'd gotten away with it. Over the next few days, I played my role perfectly. I asked questions about our life, about his job as a real estate attorney, about my work as a kindergarten teacher. I let him tell me about our friends, our routines, our marriage, and I watched as he slowly started to relax to believe that I really didn't remember. But at night, when he thought I was asleep, I heard him on the phone. The first time, it was 3 days after I came home. I was lying in bed, my eyes closed, my breathing slow and even. David was in the bathroom, the door cracked open just enough for me to hear. "She doesn't remember anything," he said, his voice low. "Yeah, I know, I got lucky. If she'd told the doctors the truth, I'd be screwed." There was a pause, and I imagined whoever he was talking to on the other end. "No, I didn't mean to hit her that hard," he continued. "She just wouldn't shut up. She kept accusing me, saying I was hiding money, that I was lying about the accounts. I lost my temper. It was an accident." Another pause. "I'm not worried. She's completely bought into the amnesia thing. She thinks I'm taking care of her. It's actually kind of pathetic." I kept my breathing steady, my body still. Inside, I was burning. The next morning, I started looking for evidence. I couldn't let David know I remembered, so I had to be careful. I waited until he left for work, and then I searched. I started with his office, a small room on the second floor that he always kept locked. I'd never had a key, but I'd watched him punch in the code to the lockbox where he kept the spare. It took me 3 tries, but I got it open. Inside, I found files, bank statements, investment portfolios, emails printed out and carefully organized. And as I read through them, I realized the truth. David had been stealing from me. For the past 2 years, he'd been siphoning money from our joint account into a private account I didn't know existed. Small amounts at first, a few hundred here and there. But over time, it had added up. $60,000. Money I'd earned, money I'd saved, gone. And there was more. Emails between him and a woman named Brooke. They were careful, never explicit, but the tone was clear. They were involved, and they were planning something. I took photos of everything with my phone, my hands shaking. Then I put everything back exactly as I'd found it and locked the office door. That night, I started planning. I couldn't go to the police, not yet. I had no proof of the assault beyond my own word, and David would just claim I was confused because of the amnesia. But I had proof of the financial theft, and that was a start. I reached out to a lawyer, a woman named Sandra Liu, who specialized in family law and fraud cases. I called her from a burner phone I'd bought at a drugstore, using cash. I explained the situation, sent her the photos I'd taken, and asked for her advice. "This is bad," she said bluntly, "but it's also actionable. If you want to move forward, we can build a case. But you need to be smart about it. Don't let him know you remember anything until we're ready." "I won't," I said. Over the next 2 weeks, I gathered more evidence. I recorded conversations with David, using my phone hidden in my pocket. I documented every lie, every manipulation, every moment he thought I was too clueless to notice. And then, one night he slipped up. We were sitting in the living room, watching television. David had been drinking, something he did more and more lately. He was on his 3rd glass of whiskey, and his guard was down. "You know, Lily," he said, his words slightly slurred. "This whole amnesia thing has actually been a blessing." I looked at him, keeping my face neutral. "What do you mean?" He laughed, a bitter sound. "I mean, I thought I was done. I thought you'd tell the doctors what really happened, and I'd be arrested. But you didn't. And now I don't have to deal with your constant nagging about money, about Brooke, about any of it. It's like I got a fresh start." My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice calm. "Brooke," he waved a hand, dismissively. "She's no one, just a colleague. But you were always so paranoid, always accusing me of things. It was exhausting." "I accused you?" I asked softly. "Yeah," he said, leaning back and closing his eyes. "You kept saying I was hiding money, that I was cheating. You wouldn't let it go. That's why I hit you. I didn't mean to, but you just kept pushing." There it was, the confession I'd been waiting for. I reached into my pocket and stopped the recording. I had everything I needed. The next morning, I called Sandra. "I'm ready," I said. She filed the paperwork that afternoon. Divorce, fraud charges, and a restraining order. The police showed up at our house the next evening while David was home. I was at Sandra's office when it happened, but she called me as soon as she heard. "They arrested him," she said. "He's being charged with assault, theft, and fraud. You did it, Lily." I sat there in her office, staring out the window at the gray DC skyline, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. The trial took 6 months. David tried to fight it, hiring an expensive lawyer and claiming I'd fabricated everything. But the evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the financial documents, the testimony from the doctors who'd treated me. Even Brooke was forced to testify, and under oath she admitted to the affair. In the end, David was convicted. He lost his law license, his reputation, and a significant amount of money in restitution. I got the house, the money he'd stolen, and my freedom. I never saw him again after the sentencing. I didn't need to. I moved back into the house in Arlington, the one we'd shared. At first, I thought about selling it, starting fresh somewhere new. But the longer I stayed, the more it started to feel like mine. I repainted the walls, replaced the furniture, planted flowers in the front yard. I erased every trace of David until the house felt like a place I could breathe again. On a cold afternoon in March, I stood in the kitchen, the same kitchen where everything had fallen apart. The marble countertops gleamed in the afternoon light. There was no blood, no anger, no fear, just silence. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the table, looking out at the backyard. The trees were still bare, but I could see the first hints of green starting to bud on the branches. Spring was coming, and I was ready for it.